ValveTime.net.
Hi, my name is James Rossi. Obviously, I am a representative of ValveTime.net. I am with Cakebread, aka Davey Wreden. Davey Wreden is the man behind Stanley Parable, the original. Were you the only one that worked on that at that point, other than the man who voiced the narrator?
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was like 99% me. It was funny because so I did the only things that I did not do. Well, like the entire source developers kit.
Yeah.
You know, like include all the art assets and everything is all just ripped straight out of Half-Life. And same with all the music. The music is all just copyrighted to other, like very successful people. But then the rest of it was all me. And then there was like someone's like keypad prefab that I used, and another person had a few metal textures. And this is just from random sites. And then I paid one guy a little bit of money to optimize it and just make it so it would actually export, because it wouldn't export because I'm terrible at mapping. And I just had like thousands of lit surfaces, in like a single room, and it was terrible. And then obviously Kevin, who does the voice. So there was like little support bits, but as far as the original was concerned, it was basically just me.
Is this a project that, like, when you first started it, was it something that you were like, oh, it'll be easy, it'll be like one map, I'll get this free engine, I'll kind of jump right into it, and then it kind of began to develop into a around like a 2-year development process for the first?
Well, that's exactly what happened. Like, which is funny because something very similar happened also with the remake. But like the original was just meant to be like a little portfolio padding. Just to like get a few people on board who would want to make other types of projects like that, and then we were supposed to, that would be the actual work. Was that? And I figured it would take like 6 months to create, and I was terrible. I was like, there's no way. If I take any more than 6 months to make this thing, like someone else is already gonna think of it. Someone else is gonna do it. I wanted to get it done as soon as possible, and that was part of what attracted me to the idea in the first place of the game was that it was just empty hallways and a disembodied voice talking to you, and I was like, oh, that's simple, that'll be totally easy, right? Or that was what I thought anyway. That was what I had anticipated, and it turns out that what I should have anticipated was a lot longer and a lot more,
a lot longer, and everyone really liking it.
That was another big thing that I didn't anticipate. Like I said, it was just meant to be like a starting point for, in a lot of ways it was, but it was meant to, I never intended it for more than just like a few people to see it and hopefully get someone on board who would want to do more work with me.
Was it, sorry.
I was just gonna, which did happen.
So when you were coming up with this idea, was it kind of oh shoot, I can't think of the word, like vindicating to kind of you that you had this idea and that people really started liking it? What started you down making a game that, well, I mean, I guess it's arguable whether it's a game or not, where it's like this interactive thing where you wander down hallways and a narrator makes fun of you for opening the wrong door?
Well, the first thing was that it sounded easy, like it sounded like a simple game. It was the only thing that started. Well, there's 2 things that started it. The first, all right, 3 things that started it. I really like narrators, and I just liked seeing interesting stuff done with narrators. It sounded easy, and then just like doors and hallways. What if a narrator talked to you? And then I thought about, well, what if he said, if so-and-so went through the door on their left, and I just didn't understand that. Like, I had that thought, and then I tried to understand what that thought meant, and I couldn't figure it out. And it didn't make sense. I was like, how he said that in the past, it doesn't work. That you could still change that. And that was what made me interested in it, was the fact that I didn't understand it, And so it was just like that whole thing came together in about a minute. It was just like, I like narrators, this is something I think I could do, and it's bizarre enough to be an interesting challenge, right? And I didn't think about it at all. There was no like active perception of what that meant or anything. It was just oh, I think that I could do something interesting here with creating a space that defies logic and making sense out of it anyway, and putting some sort of structure on an inherently, internally dissociated, disconnected world. And the fact that I put almost no thought into it is probably what made it, at all interesting. Like the fact that I was not thinking at all about what anyone would think about it, or care about it, or like, or whether or not people would like. I mean, I'm sure I was, but compared to now, where that's a very real thing for me. Where there is a very real, like, I am recognized as having done that, and whatever future work I do, there carries a sort of expectation of a reception to it. Like, it was so weird how after 2 years of working on the game, I just, like, I didn't care about it. I cared about it, but it was like, I didn't think it was anything special. I didn't think it was anything
It wasn't
good.
it wasn't like, your favorite child.
No. I just wanted it out the door. I just want to send it to college. Just get out of my face. Just get out of my house, right? So I was just really happy just to have it done. And like I said, I didn't think it was anything that particularly special. And then when people started to say that they did find it special, it was very oddly vindicating. Like I didn't know whether or not to trust myself after that, Like I had spent all this time thinking about like setting my expectations super, super, super low. Like no one will play this. No one will like it.
And then all of a sudden, thousands upon thousands of people are, actually getting it to try it, and all of the media is explaining just like, it's like gushing over it because it's such a fun and unique thing, especially for the time. I feel like I had like some very like in-depth questions, being like, were you taken from this a literary angle or perhaps a commentary on games such as Black Ops? It's interesting that the original genesis of the idea wasn't necessarily that in depth, or the genesis was. The execution actually, I feel, did reach a surprising level of depth for a game where it's just a guy wandering through corridors while someone talks.
Yeah, and like you do intend that, but your intention really, like, when you're creating something, you have to maintain a sense of the distance between your intentions and whatever the hell reality will actually be. Like you cannot go into this project thinking like, oh, all of these people will get what it's about. Like all of these people will get the message or anything. You can't do that, because as soon as you start going down that path, it's just horrible. It's like, and I say this having been now through, like, after Stanley came out, and I feel like I do have a level of like personal recognition, and I'm constantly dealing with like the fear of validation, and of like, will people like whatever it is that I do now? Like I have a standard to meet or something. But at the time there was none of that. At the time it was just like, well, what, this is kind of different. This is it just seemed like something that I just kind of wanted to do. And I don't know where that comes from. It's really hard to say. It was less a response to one thing, like a Black Ops thing, and it was more of just like the kind of collective ideas and thoughts that had been sort of percolating in my head up to that point, I suppose.
Something I did notice. I was checking out the blog that you have at Galactic Cafe, and just the other day you mentioned about how you were not a finalist for any of the IGF picks. You were you were an honorable mention, and you brought up how that brought a lot of mixed feelings. I mean, you don't have to rehash the entire thing. If people want to read it, and they should, then they can absolutely. I'll have a link somewhere. Like it'll show up. It'll be great. But like,
I think everyone's really looking forward to that link.
I certainly hope so.
I think that the link is probably going to be one of the highlights of this interview in the end. What people will remember, as they come back to.
now that you've had success, now do you have to, like, desperately go after trying to replicate that, or do you, it's like, or kind of striking out on continuing doing your own thing and then just, hoping that it continues to connect?
Yeah, this has been on my mind a lot lately. Like, this has been a really, really big thing for me because one thing that the IGF thing really highlighted. So for what happened, just to kind of quick recap. So the Independent Game Festival awards at GDC in March. The nominations just came out earlier, well, a week ago, as of this interview, in early January, and Stanley was not nominated for an award, and I really, really, really thought we were going to be. I was really sure of it, and to the point where it was just kind of like a reality for me, and then we didn't get it, and it highlighted a lot of bad tendencies that I have had in forming a level of expectation about the reception to the game, and just to anything that I do, I suppose. Like, when the very first game that you ever make becomes wildly successful, it is not good for your ego. It really isn't. And I did it in reverse. Like, I started out all like inspired, and I mean, like, I got the success when I shouldn't have, and then had to learn the creative process afterward, as opposed to learning the creative process and then becoming successful. And that was a weird way to do it, and it did not leave me. It was really difficult to deal with, because as an early 20s guy, that with all of this very specific personal praise on me, you can't help but start to form a god complex. Like, you just can't help but thinking that everything I do from now on is going to be mint. Like, I've got it made from here on out. I just need to live in to this stupidly, lofty perception of my career and work for the rest of my life. That's all. And that's really not a good thing, because I can tell that many times it's guided me toward doing something because I thought that people would want it or expect it, rather than because it was something that I really wanted to do, or by the same token, not doing something that I really wanted to do because I was afraid of how people would respond to it, what people would think of it, would it live up to, whatever I do after Stanley Parable, is it like, live up to the expectations of the thing that comes after Stanley Parable. And that's such a toxic mindset, and I can see now that it is. And part of what brought that up for me was, not getting into the IGF and realizing that there's just my perception of how I think it'll go, and then there's the reality of how it actually goes, and a lot of times those things don't line up. And I'd had a lot invested in the reality that I was going to get into IGF, and I'm really glad to have humbled for myself, to have been humbled in that way, and to have not gotten what I wanted, to show myself that I'm not invincible, that I'm not, that everything that I do is not just going to automatically be like, get me a parade through town or whatever. Because in a lot of ways that was the sort of expectation that had formed in my head through like all of the reception to Stanley Parable. And I know that in a lot of ways I still do that, like I'm still definitely kind of scared of reception to the things that I do, still kind of like, oh, will people like the fact that this is what I'm doing, like, after Stanley or whatever, but certainly after the IGF thing, it knocked me down a few notches to where I'm like, all right, let's get this out of the way, let's get this out of my system, and let's just do whatever, let's do the stuff that I actually really want to do, and try to get the whole validation thing through my system as fast as possible, and move on to, you know, a more mature form of creative output.
So moving back very slightly, where you mentioned doing things because you feel like people expected it, as opposed to the idea that you really wanted to do it, and not everything you do being realized. For a while, you had I believe it was an iPhone port for Stanley Parable that you wanted to do.
Right.
Do you think that was part of that? Like, you know, it's if it could be ported, then it should be, because that's what games do, or?
Well, yeah, and the other part of it was that I when I wanted to cancel it, I was talking with a friend of, like, shortly before I decided to cancel it, I was talking with a friend of mine, and I was saying to him that I wanted the game to come out soon, and I didn't want it to do very well because I didn't want people to associate it with me. I didn't want a lot of people to play it, and he looked at me and he's like, "What are you talking about? Don't release this game," right? And there was a sort of perception that I, like, quote unquote needed to put it out, you know, but I don't know where that came from, I suppose, because at the end of the day, I didn't want it to be out. I wasn't happy with it, and that was really hard to do. Like, you know, to admit that I had made a mistake there in doing that, right? Like, because I knew that people were interested in it, and I knew that people were excited by the idea, and I knew that it wasn't as good as I wanted it to be. And that was a smaller lesson. There have been a lot, you know, that's one of many small lessons. So just to tie it back, the one thing that I'm grateful for with the IGF thing was that it was a very, very big thing for me, and failing at that was a very big reminder where, you know, in addition, like the iPhone thing was a smaller reminder about the importance of my belief in what I'm doing, and regardless of what anyone else thinks or says or what the expectation is, that, you know, starting with me, that is something I'm really proud of putting out. And that was a big lesson.
I have to say, I'm impressed that your standard for failure is 2 or 3 honorable mentions.
Oh, no, right. That's the incredible thing. I mean, like, we were honorable mention in the grand prize, right? Like, holy crap, what an honor. Like, it's like, this is the important clarification, is that I couldn't be more honored that we did get the recognition that we did, and that everything else with Stanley Parable has been so overwhelmingly positive, and the failure is the failure of my expectations to stay grounded enough for me to do what I do effectively. You know, like, it was the fact that in my head, it was all about getting the nomination, and anything else was, to me, was a failure, right? And when I realized that I was doing that was where I realized that I had an unhealthy behavior going, in the fact that I had, like, this line that was like, anything less than that is going to be, you know, not acceptable. Right, and I barely even realized that I was doing that, and then when that did happen, and I you know, like, we got 3 honorable mentions in different categories, I think more than any other game, and I was still disappointed, and I was like, okay, something about my attitude here has to change. If that's what I'm bringing to it, that we can get these 3 honorable mentions, and I can still be disappointed, and so that was a big wake up call for me, that, like, you know, there's got to be something more to this for me, and for what I'm getting out of this than just getting a nomination in a festival, you know.
Do you feel that the Greenlight process, when it comes to the kind of support that does actually wind up being involved, like, you know, how did it make you feel when you actually did get voted in?
Well, it was interesting because, you know, what we did with our Greenlight was put up no information about the game, and then try to use photographs and text to convey the spirit of the game, and to kind of dance around it and make it reference itself and the fact that it didn't actually explain anything, and to create a kind of disorientation in that way. And it was really special when people did respond to that. And obviously, you're going to get a lot of people who say, well, if you're not going to tell me anything about your game, I'm not going to vote for it. But and there were many people who just already knew about the original Stanley Parable and were like, oh, cool, I'm just excited about this, and they were kind of in on the joke and they got it. And then there were a bunch of people who were like, I have no idea what this is and I can't wait for it, right? And like the fact, like, we got enough response like that to say we're probably headed in the right direction, both in terms of the style of the game itself and how we're using this marketing material to talk about it and to create a conversation about this game that is about, not just you can't talk about it, but why can't you talk about it, and what is it about the game that makes it difficult to explain. And so as we're planning out what how we're going to promote the game as we get closer to launch, it's been a really great reference point to help understand that we can do that it is possible to launch, to do sort of marketing campaign in that way that does hold back information and actually makes it a part of the conversation about the game rather than detrimental to it. Or that's what I'm hoping anyway.
Are those themes that you are planning to or have incorporated into the game itself, that kind of theme, or is it just good marketing? Like, is it just a good way to present your mod?
Well, one thing that's important for me, and sort of a general rule that we have in development, and this applies to the game itself as well as to sort of all the marketing and stuff around it, is never do the same thing twice. And so it's important that the experience that you're getting in the marketing is not, there's no analogous version of that in the game itself. The spirit is the game, but we want to make sure the spirit is connected between the two things, but we want to make sure that you'll still be surprised by the game even if you've seen all of the marketing and everything, like if you've been through all that, and that just ended up like that's more understated in the game itself. We don't really draw a lot of attention to that specific thing, like to the whole you can't talk about it. Like that was just like with the original game, in the game's description on ModDB, I just put some really vague stuff, and then I said it's probably better if you don't know anything about it before you play it. And so I started that just with a little snippet of phrase there, and then everyone else ran with that, and everyone was like, I can't tell you anything about it. Who's to say, maybe if I had put up a really detailed description of it, people would still be doing that anyway. But I know that people really excited about that whole idea and really wanted to run with it, even though it's not in the game itself. It's more like the game is pointing in that direction. It's like it kind of leads you there without ever specifically saying, don't tell your friends about this. And it was really cool to see people pick up on that and get that and be like, I'm glad you're doing that, and I'm glad that I had that experience where I felt like I wanted other people to know about this, but I had no way of possibly explaining what it was to them. And that then becomes a unique experience in the marketing that you're not going to get in the game itself, and then it becomes like a new piece of content. It's not support content. It is supporting the game, but the marketing itself stands on its own in a way. It is literally its own experience, and that's really cool. To get to feel like I'm not just promoting my game, I'm actually giving you like an entirely new experience. I'm giving you one game now and then another when the actual main game comes out. I really like that, and I'm excited about that.
Now there's a whole lot about the Stanley Parable that works, from the way that you've advertised it, from a lot of the presentation, from the fantastic work of the narrator. Is there anything about the original Stanley Parable that you really just feel didn't work, that you were just really unhappy with?
Yeah, and that's the fundamental problem of the game, and this is the same in the new game. The game is fundamentally flawed in that it's a branching structure. It's you just walk through the same exact halls over and over. And if you've been down 9 or whatever paths, you know, you have to count out how many you've been through and figure out how many you still need to go into, and it becomes like a pixel hunt in a way, you know, for people. It just becomes like hunting those avenues down.
Yeah, I remember that, like, you know, desperately trying to remember, like, saving before every door and then entering and trying to figure out if it was the one I meant to go through.
Right. And that's, you know, we've thought about addressing it in various ways, like a quick, like a teleport thing or whatever, but it just never felt right. We have something that we're doing with the new game to try to address it, but I don't think it's certainly not solving the problem on a fundamental level. It's more of a Band-Aid solution. And that's always really bugged me, but at this, like, that was what drew me to the idea in the first place, was that I had a fundamental problem with it, you know? Like, I had an issue with how games do that, and with games that are built on such a poorly, you know, that don't provide a kind of structure that does make me feel engaged with it in that way, that so clearly are so just so structured, you know, and that like to where I'm noticing the systems constantly, and it prevents me from feeling like I'm engaged with it. And so, you know, the fun of it was to try to see, can I actually make something interesting out of that, right? Can we have that, and for me still to find a way to make it interesting to people, you know, and to still get people engaged with it. But at the end of the day, the problem is still there. You know, the problem hasn't gone away. And I don't think I ever will be able to get it to go away. I don't think there's ever anything I'll be able to do that, you know, that's part of what makes the game work, is that it seems like it shouldn't work, right? is that by all accounts it shouldn't work because it's built on a structure that it like kind of inherently defies engagement, and that's part of what has given it its charm, you know, is that it seems like it shouldn't work and somehow it kind of does.
I feel like in a way it's almost like, at least in the first one, that it sort of addressed that within itself in some ways, like even in circumstances where you would defy what you're being told. Even if, you know, the narrator voice acted like kind of indignant about you not listening to him, you still have to realize, like, somewhere in the back of your head, you're still thinking, well, this guy recorded this audio like months ago. Like, all of these things are in there. All, like, even my rebellion has been programmed in and accounted for. And so, like, those kinds of, like, that kind of issue with anything where you have like branching paths and that sort of stuff was one of the things that I really enjoyed thinking about as I was playing in the original.
Right. And like I said, that makes it fun, you know, like it's cool that those things do help the player engage with the game. But it always, every time that I get like a feedback or a playtest or something, or a response that's like, yeah, but you know, I got a little bit like worn down later in the game as I was just kind of rotely thinking about which path had I gone down, and I'm like, because every other problem in the game we can address it in some way, and that we just cannot address, and I haven't found a good way to, in a way that still maintains the integrity of the rest of the game and actually does leave it, that doesn't just feel like we're trying to appease you, like, here, have, you know, warp ahead to whatever place, you know, no more waiting. It feels it feels like we're compromising in a way, and I wish that there was something more that I could do about that specific issue, but that's really the one complaint that I'm pretty sure is just, well, that's gonna be what sucks about our game, you know? So every game's gotta have something, right? You know, like
that'll be like the one point that keeps it from being 100.
Well, you know, it's like on like IGN's reviews or whoever's, when they're like pros, cons. You know, like that'll be on our cons. It's like tedious walking back through the same hallways over and over.
Pro, concept of the game. Con, concept of the game.
Yeah, dude, seriously. That's oh god, I hope IGN puts that on their review of it. Oh my god. I'm so hoping for that. That's all I want.
So
we'll see how that goes.
So you've got this project that is so that's very, it's idea driven. It relies on being a cohesive piece. Like, sounds vitally important. How have you transitioned from having the team of essentially just yourself going to a team of dedicated workers, or it's like people cooperating with you? Like what is that situation, and how have you transitioned into it?
Well, the first thing is that everyone who has come on board has done so out of what I can tell is a really genuine interest in the game. Like people who really get the game. At the core of our development team is myself and William Pugh, he's doing all of the mapping. So if you played the original game and thought, I hope no one ever puts this man in front of the source level editor again, I have good news for you.
Putting someone in front of the source editor is a punishment I reserve for very bad people.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. William is, and we have support from other fantastic developers as well. But William, in addition to doing the most of the level development, is also my creative collaborator on it. And which, I said before that the original game, I didn't playtest it with anyone. I didn't show it to anyone. I didn't show anyone the script or anything prior to actually releasing it. And the fact that I have had someone now to show my work to has just changed the process so much. So much is in there now that never would have come in if I hadn't had someone to bounce ideas off of, and who really understood it. And at the very beginning of the project, when he first came on board, neither of us really knew what it was. I knew the original game, but we didn't really know where the new version was going. And it took 6 months of us really working together regularly to start to get comfortable enough with each other to where the game took on a life of its own. It became a separate entity aside from just the two of us, and we started to see not just what do you or I want, but what does the game want? What is it trying to tell us that it wants to be? And in as much as I wrote the original and I'm doing most of the writing now and the creative direction and everything, it's William's game as much as mine. There is nothing in the game that I would not trust him to make the right decision on. Does it need to be there? And that has just, made things so much better for me on just a personal level, where I just feel better. I just feel happier, having someone to share stuff with and not feeling like I'm carrying the weight of the whole thing by myself all the time. And so that just worked out, right? That could have very easily, and I couldn't have known, because we worked together for 6 months or something before that really started to click, and that could have happened in any number of ways. Same thing with not finding Kevin to do the voice, right? Who knows? You can't account for those kinds of things. You can't predict when something really fantastic will enter into your life or not. So I guess all I can say about it is I'm incredibly grateful that it's worked out the way it has, and that I've been blessed with collaborators who are not only really good at what they do, but also who also consider this a really special game. And it's an incredible treat to get to do that, and to do it with people who are living all over the world. We all just Skype, so it's a pretty convenient way to get development done.
Now, so should probably start wrapping up. I've had you been talking forever. About
literally one eternity.
Seriously,
Yeah,
I'm running out of infinite drive space. About do you have any time estimates for the completion of the project?
I've started to consider it a waste of energy to put those estimates on it. We had like 4 or 5 different times when I thought I knew what the release date was going to be, and then it doesn't make me feel better about what we're doing. It makes me put all these sort of imaginary constraints on it, or I start trying to cut corners. And I don't think that's good at all. So I don't know. I would love it if it came out mid 2013. But if it doesn't, it doesn't. And that's about all I can. That's about the extent to which I think I can interact with our release date.
I think that's a good spot to call it a day. Davey, I want to thank you so much for taking time to talk with me. Like it was absolutely fantastic. Like so much good stuff.
I'm very glad to hear. I'm very glad to be able to get to have, just cool conversations and just chat about whatever.